Joining me here in the studio is Talha Kose. He's an associate professor of political science over at Haldun University, and Meryem Ilayda Atlas. She's an editorial coordinator over at the Daily Sabah. Thank you both for coming on here onto our special program. Talha, let me begin with you. When the Fetullah Gulen organization was growing in influence, growing in strength, was their mission objective always to take over the state, or did that sort of emerge over time?
I think since from the beginning, this organization had that objectives. So if we look at the track record of this organization, in 1986, they took the examination of military schools, and they infiltrated at that time. So which means that before 1986, they planned joining to military school, police academy, and the judicial system. So which means that from the early 1980s, this organization planned to take over the state apparatus in Turkey, especially the security sector and judicial sector.
Meryem, when you look at the network, it's mind-boggling how well they were organized and how deep they were able to infiltrate into the various state apparatus. Right?
Yes.
Get your thoughts on that. I mean, over time, the depth of how deep they could infiltrate, and the strength that they actually were able to accumulate.
Well, they have different levels, their organization. Especially in the lower level, they were just it seems like a kind of educational services, religious services for people, especially for women and children, doing charity and providing religious and educational services that will attract lower class families, especially providing cheap or free education for smart students, and they are getting providing scholarship for them. So in the lowest level, it was a kind of attracting people and having positive reaction from the society. But on the middle level, they have got more links with the trade and with businessmen and with the kind of middle class and upper class people, and using them in order to funding their terrorist organization. And on the upper level, they have got very much infiltrated deep links with the judiciary, in the military, in different state organizations, especially intelligence organizations, MIT, and in the police forces. So they have got different levels of organization, and their infiltration capacity is a very good capacity, actually.
Let me ask you, Meryem was talking about the different levels of infiltration. That's all fine, but organizing a coup is a task by itself. So that's completely different. It's at a level that's possibly unimaginable.
Yeah, I mean, in order to organize a coup, I think you need to have control over the military intelligence, at least to a certain extent. To legitimize this operation coup, you need to have some external support, some capacity, diplomatic capacity. On the other hand, you have to influence media to shape people's mindset and attract some supporters. So it's a very complicated operation. So in the past, we know that Turkish people at least trusted Turkish military, and they knew that the military is controlling, at least in contact with other state apparatus. In that sense, Turkish military had some legitimacy. However, majority of Turkish people still resisted to, psychologically to the coup. But as a small organization which infiltrated the state apparatus, I think it's a very complicated operation. So you need to have some economic resources, you need to have some public capacity, public diplomacy, you need to have some external support, diplomatic support, you need to be connected with international actors, and you need to also convince Turkish population, at least you need to have some people who believe this story. So it is, and at the same time, as I mentioned, starting from 1980s, you need to have special group of officials within the military that came to the ranks of generals. So they started in 1980s, and those people who are, in the military academies came to the ranks of generals in 2016. So that's a very long planning operation, and they didn't lose their ties they didn't lose their connection with this organization. So it's a huge planning which has both levels, the grassroots level, international level. At the same time, it has judicial component, bureaucratic component, as well as the media component. So it's a long-term planning.
You say that the people had trust in the institution of the military. Let me turn back to you, Meryem. Multiple coups before. Is Fetullah Gulen what made this coup different than the rest?
Exactly, the violence against public, ordinary citizens, because that created too much resentment and public outcry when people see that jets or some military people are shooting ordinary people in the street. That's never happened before. Bombing parliamentary building has never happened before. Also bombing presidential palace was also dramatic. Of course, we had a history of coups in Turkey, but before 1980 coup, people has an idea of, as Mr. Kose said, has a kind of credit for always has a kind of credit for the military, and also they think that military can stabilize politics when necessary. But 1980 coup data created a kind of trauma in Turkish society because of the execution of many young people from left to right, and in a very different, it was very difficult for the society. And between those times, from 1980 to 2016, Turkish society transformed a lot. It changed a lot sociologically and democratically. And we have seen in 2016 that there is a kind of more educated young people that are aware of and have a consciousness against coup d'etat. So it was not easy to convince people to creating a coup d'etat. This was one thing. And the other thing was when coup plotters in 2016 go to the streets, the most significant making it different from the other things was two things. First, it was not in a common hierarchy. It was not in a hierarchical common change from the army. And secondly, it was using violence against ordinary citizens. Yeah. They were ordering to bomb police stations, attacking police headquarters, attacking intelligence quarters. So the violence was the most distinctive difference, making it different, not resembling to other coups. Even though it is kind of, there was a struggle to make it as resembling it to other coups, like peace at home, peace in the world, like this kind of sayings, and making one of the TRT World presenters read a declaration by gunpoint, of course. And these attempts were similar to previous coups, but exactly the way how they organized it and purely implemented and then failed it was different.
I have about 2 minutes left in this section, so I want 1 minute answer from each of you. We'll start with you. Is the Fetullah threat over for Turkey?
Well, the actual threat may be over, but the infiltration is so complex, especially in the media and social media. There are lots of disinformation and very, very smart and intelligent conviction policies for people. So the disinformation and manipulation policies creating a kind of sometimes natural threats for people. So in some extent it continues for me.
Talha?
I think the problem is that they can change their face and reintegrate the other communities, other groups in Turkey. So they can behave like the leftists, they can behave like pro-Kurdish, they can behave like a supporter of other religious groups. Unfortunately, Turkish people still do not have any kind of resilience against this kind of transformation. So they have many faces, they can reintegrate, they can reshape themselves and reorient themselves. So at the grassroots level, I think people lost their trust. However, the loyal actors, loyal groups, loyalists who are still connected to this organization, I think will try to reshape, reorient themselves according to changing circumstances in Turkey. That's why I think there are still lots of people who are connected to this organization within the ranks of the state apparatus, bureaucracy, and some other organizations.
And a lot of those loyalists are actually are residing in countries other than Turkey. We're going to switch gears for a second here. I'm going to sort of introduce a package. Let's take a listen to it, and we're going to continue our conversation. Well, the Fetullah Gulen has been running his secretive terror network from a compound tucked away in rural Pennsylvania for decades. He's protected by armed security around the clock, and dozens, maybe in fact hundreds of his operatives are believed to reside at that headquarters. Our correspondent, Yunus Paksoy, traveled there to find out more about the network.
A terror network that attempted to overthrow a foreign government is scamming millions of US taxpayer dollars and buying influence in the state's capital. And it's operating here in the United States. The Fetullah terrorist organization, also known as the Gulen movement in America, is public enemy number one in Turkey following a failed coup attempt in 2016 that killed over 250 people. Their ringleader Fetullah Gulen has lived here in Salisbury, Pennsylvania since 1999, a small town with about 1,000 residents. Fetullah Gulen's compound, hidden in the forests of the Pocono Mountains, is as secretive as the organization itself, a retreat from the outside, but dozens, maybe hundreds of FETÖ members here call the center their headquarters. FETÖ's compound alone sits on more than 10 hectares of land, and his next-door neighbor told us the organization continues to buy more properties in the area. Gulen also spends millions of dollars in lobbying to expand his influence in the US.
It's very cartel or mafia-like in that sense, in that it's very difficult to pin down a formal organization when they're very busy denying it and making donations to people in support of the non-existence of this organization.
FETÖ is believed to make hundreds of millions of dollars every year through its vast network of schools they run in the United States, and some of that money is used to push through its agenda. Scores of lawmakers from the US have reportedly traveled to Turkey on tours funded by the group in the past in exchange for political favors. But for many American citizens, Gulen's organization is still a mystery.
Most Americans don't know who Fetullah Gulen is, don't know where Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania is, and don't know any of the backstory about this, not from the policy level and not from the legal level. So that's the first thing to remember from a Turkish perspective, that this issue that is all pervasive and very pressing matter of national security is not on the radar screen for most Americans.
Ankara has long asked Washington for Gulen's return to Turkey, shipping dozens of boxes of evidence. Although officials said the US has been working on the request, his extradition proves to be an uphill battle.
Extradition requires a different standard, that they show individual culpability. But just as Al Capone made sure that he did not have his fingerprints on the various criminal activities that his organization was involved in, I think people running this sort of an enterprise learn to do that. So individual culpability will be very, very hard to prove.
And so, a foreign designated terrorist leader continues to call Pennsylvania home, further growing his influence on American soil. Yunus Paksoy, TR2 World, Pennsylvania, United States.
Let's go back to my guest now, Talha Kose and Meryem Ilayda Atlas. Yunus was talking in this package about the Fetullah Gulen terror network and their vast network of charter schools, but also the deep political connections that the group has. I was wondering if you could elaborate on the presence it has in the United States for the last 20 years.
To me, questions? Yeah. Okay. For United States, this kind of charity schools and schooling is complete. It's somehow out of state control, because it's the charity school concept is very much that FETÖ can use it for its own purposes, because all of the organization in Turkey was established from this kind of schooling and education, and it was a kind of very good source of financing. But it was not only in Turkey, it was in Southern Asian countries, and it was in Africa as well. And in United States, we have seen that many of the FETÖ members fled to United States and established schools there, especially in last 5 years. But especially in last 20 years, as you have seen, as you have said, that there is also a kind of this kind of schooling activity, especially in the Muslim population, providing a kind of religious education for the different sections of Muslim communities, and educating their children, and also focusing on the elite structures of their society, and also investing somehow the children of these elite families, that they can in the future can be leaders of their own society, that they can control them. It's a very smart and very well organized kind of future investment. This is what they did in Africa. It's now somehow failed with the efforts of Turkish government, and this is what they are doing in United States as far as I see.
And the political connections?
Of course, I mean, they use actually capacity of the Turkish state. So they infiltrated to foreign ministry, different other ministries, Turkish military, so and some other governmental institutions, and they were also very well organized in the civil society. However, their main actually activism was raised from their experience from within the ranks of the Turkish state, so foreign ministry, other ministries. So they get this connection and they reorganize. Different people, different members from different ministries came together, organized their connections, and they learned how to operate in different contexts and how to engage with different actors, political actors, media actors, and civil society actors. And this capacity actually allowed them to operate more freely, and also they learned the legal systems within these countries. So I think this capacity that they gained from their governmental and bureaucratic experience in the aftermath worked in the interest of this organization. So they know the tricks within the political system. They know how to, campaign in those countries, how campaigns work, and they know how to engage with the ordinary people, how to use charity money, and how to collect charity money. So they know the tricks of the system, and they, because of the human capital and capacity, they reorganize the entire resources and make these resources even more capable under the coordination.
Okay, if they know the rules of the game, if they can play the tricks of the trade, why is it that most Western countries, our so-called strategic allies, were so late to come out and actually express their support for Turkey after what happened 5 years ago?
For many reasons, because that the Western countries always suspicious for Turkish democracy. So when there is a kind of very different issue, they always talk about values and values. When there's a kind of trade agreement, they can use an excuse that you are just making a terror organization in the Syrian border, that's why we're not investing. So freedom of speech and democracy is so much double standard when looking at Turkey. So for the first reaction, they failed to understand what was happening because of there were previous coups in Turkey, but the last previous coup was like about 30 years ago in 1980. And then after we can see some kind of memorandums of the army urging government, and in, the nearest one, the recent one is in 2007, and which is completely rejected by the government, and then Erdogan's government went to snap elections in order to ask for people's support, and people supported it. And as I said before, the Turkish society changed a lot. Turkish society is now creating kind of anger and rejection of this kind of tutelage. So that's why they could not see and understand the society, and this is my understanding. They evaluated it, and with the heat of the moment, their first evaluation was this country coup d'etats can happen here, so it's a kind of military reaction. Even though they know the intelligence, the other way which can be a conspiracy theory, of course, but I want to say this, it can be said that, okay, if a group of people, doesn't matter coming from where, if they can topple down Erdogan, then it's okay for us.
All right, up to that point. All right, this happened under the Obama administration. They weren't able to do anything. His predecessor or successor, under the Trump administration, nothing happened now. We're in a third U.S. administration. Are you confident that some ground will be gained in terms of the extradition of Fetullah Gulen?
No, I don't expect that, because Gulen is a long-term investment in the U.S. and they don't want to lose their assets. So although it may be costly for them, I think this will say different things to the world. And on the other hand, they are also unhappy about Turkey's autonomous and ambitious foreign policy and economy policies. So they want this threat at least to stay there, and when Turkey behaves too much out of line with their policies, I think they want to have some instrument to demonstrate to Turkey, unfortunately. So there is no sincerity with regard to Gulen issue in Turkish-American relations, unfortunately.
It may be difficult to prove individual culpability, as that gentleman was saying in the news package, but the evidence against him must be overwhelming, so it has to be overlooked. One has to assume that then.
Exactly. Well, for extradition issue of Fetullah Gulen is not also Gulen himself is an asset for the United States. He's now a very old man, but there is a kind of connection with his followers in Turkey and in everywhere in the world. So it's a kind of like illness and a kind of a very different tie with his followers. And extradition of Fetullah Gulen will cause a resolution of this movement. So that's why they are protecting him, I believe.
Do you think that Fetullah Gulen will at some point pose a security threat for the country that actually houses him?
Well, I mean, it is very difficult because they have under strict contract. So in the countries they operate, they do not want to, especially Western countries, Germany, France, Belgium, and in the US, they don't really want to engage into, their domestic politics. However, when you think about the mindset of this organization, messianic organization that has a hybrid kind of terrorist organization, I think they will eventually constitute a problem because their teachings, their mindset are very sick and they are very much messianic, and they educate, train their people under these teachings. So if you think about all these teachings and all these stories within this community, I think they may eventually constitute a threat. However, under the normal interactions with the countries that support them, they will not in the short term. But I think that the training system, a whole belief system within this organization can push believers to any direction.
Ma'am, we're coming to the end of our special program. I want to ask you, what do you think Turkey has learned in the last 5 years?
I think that Turkey learned the national unity and peace and prosperity of the country is the most important thing for all of us, for each and every fellow Turkish citizen, and 84 million of people, as President Erdogan stated and underlined today. Because July 15 is not belong to anything. It's not a political event. It's something, an attack against every individual of this nation. And it's created a kind of unity and understanding for better running for the democratic institutions, and also gaining support for democratic process, free and fair elections. How much it is important, because infiltration into the state, into the judiciary, into the military, people suffered a lot because it was not easy to understand what was going on, and some people were detained because of this FETÖ organization. And some people were just lost their jobs, their positions. They wanted to not infiltrate into the state, but they also infiltrated into universities. They wanted to infiltrate into publications, the teaching of the school, the mindset. So they have a kind of behavioral sciences, and that's attacking and manipulating people. This is completely against the free will and freedom of speech for everybody. And at that night, 5 years ago, we have seen that every individual, every fellow Turkish citizens were rejecting to this. And this is what they not considered. The reaction of the Turkish people, this is not what they did not calculate.
And that's why we're calling our coverage a night of defiance. All right, it's certainly been a very enlightening conversation. Thank you to the both of you, Meryem Ilayda Atlas and Talha Kose. It was a pleasure having you on.